dear teachers and students, I welcome you all to this very important session on unlocking innovative solutions, open access and democratization of knowledge for climate, biodiversity and sustainability. This important session is organized by Internal Quality Assessment Cell, that is IQAC Hansraj College, Mahatma Hansraj Malviya Mission Teacher Training Center, MMTTC, and Institution Innovation Council IIC, Semantic Climate Group, and this is also supported by Cambridge India Research Foundation. Semantic Climate is a group of students, mentors and advisors who strongly feel that knowledge about climate should be made available and information should be accessible to everyone. It is to mitigate the harmful effects of greenhouse gases emission and global warming. We are thankful to Dr. Gitanjali Yadav, who has provided us the opportunity to host the international team of experts who are going to share their insights into various facets of climate change. Hansraj College is one of the largest constituent college of University of Delhi, and humanities, arts and science coexist here. For understanding the complex topic of climate change, interdisciplinary knowledge is required, and I am sure that today's session will help all of us in better understanding of climate change, biodiversity and sustainability. Now it's time to express our gratitude to our guest. I request Ms. Alka Kakkad ma'am, IQAC Director, to kindly present the memento and a big to Professor Peter Murray Rust. Professor Murray is Professor of Artificial Intelligence and Phytochemistry in Department of Chemistry, University of Cambridge, UK. I request again ma'am to felicitate Professor Simon Worthington. Professor Simon Worthington is working at TIB, Leibniz Information Center for Science and Technology, European Union. Now I request Dr. Ambika and Professor Monica Kaul ma'am to present a memento and a book to our esteemed guests, Professor Marwa Halmi. Professor Marwa Halmi is Professor of Botany and Ecology at Alexandria University, Egypt.
We actually gave books because we thought it would be easy for you to carry.
We've been getting planters and pots everywhere. This is the first time we have got a book.
This book is really nice. And I request Dr. Pratibha Pandey and Dr. Anurag to felicitate Dr. Gitanjali Yadav. Dr. Yadav is Senior Scientist at NIPGR Delhi. Thank you very much everyone. Now I would like to request Monica on the dais to share her thoughts and deliver welcome address.
Good afternoon everyone. Good afternoon the senior panelists on the dais, the esteemed guests who have agreed to come over to Hansraj College to share their expertise with us. Actually, sir, we brought in here a group of students who are motivated to work in data science. So it's a group who will actually interact with you, and they are the ones who have volunteered to be a part of this group. So with that thing in mind, they'll be interacting. All their questions would be, on the data aspects and how climate science can be made more, the terminology which is not accessible to many of us, and because climate seems to be treated like defense science for many of us for years, because it was considered to be an international program, and senior bureaucrats will be talking upon on these aspects, and you had protocols like Montreal and Kyoto and all, which made us a little alien towards this science. So now it is the time to democratize the knowledge on climate science. It's the time that everyone who is committed acts on it. So for this, I would like to thank Gitanjali, who has brought here in a team of people who are self-committed, and they want to reach out to every person across the communities, and considering that students are the future of India, and students are, and we are talking about globalization, and we are saying that we are the global leaders. India is going to be the global leader, and we are talking about Viksit Bharat. And today we are also celebrating actually globalization of science in memory of Professor C.V. Raman, who said that science can progress only if it is for everyone. You can't segregate science into boundaries. So all these thoughts are very important, and celebrating National Day along with an international team of experts is such a proud moment for Hansraj College. We thank you all for agreeing to come over and spending your valuable time with us. You were here on so many other programs, you have so many commitments, and within that commitment you found some space for us. Thank you so much for agreeing to come over. So on behalf of Hansraj College, on behalf of the IQAC Director Alka ma'am, and on behalf of the Institution Innovation Council, Faculty Development Center of the Hansraj College, I again extend you warm welcome to our college, and I hope this 1.5 hour of interaction will make us more educated and will spread this knowledge further. Thank you so much.
Now I would like to invite Dr. Ambika to introduce our first speaker of the day, Professor Teacher Murray Rust.
A very good afternoon, everyone. It is my privilege to welcome and introduce our esteemed speaker Professor Murray Rust. He is a distinguished professor of chemistry at the University of Cambridge. He is a pioneer in text and mining and use of AI over NLP based on community framework, and has designed tool sets that facilitate the liberation of scientific data and building of further tools for improved open science technology and medicine communication. He is currently in India as a Yusuf Hamid Awardee of the University of Cambridge and is being hosted by Dr. Yadav at NIPGR to strengthen academic and research collaborations with Cambridge. He has a very keen interest in meeting and working with youth in India. Without taking much time, I would like to ask Sir to share his views with us. Welcome, Sir.
Thank you very much. Now, how many people here are undergraduates?
All.
Excellent. You are the most important people in the room because you are the ones who are going to build the future. How many of you are scientists?
How many of your science students? They don't qualify.
How many are economists? How many are historians? Right. So economists and scientists, very important for the future of the world. So what we are doing, we have a huge crisis in the world, the biggest we've ever known, and we are going to need knowledge for everybody if we are going to solve it. So we've been to the United Nations in Geneva. The books, the reports they have on climate, if we put them all together, they go from here to the end of the table. 100,000 paragraphs. No human can read all that, so we need machines to read it. But they are published in English, and that's a language which we went to Haryana 3 days ago. The students in the towns there, it is their second language. It's not easy for them to understand. So how can we take this knowledge to the whole world? And we have to do it exponentially. So talking to you here, we want all of us, it's not me and you, it's us. We want all of us to think how we can replicate, how we can go out and spread the word, because that's the only way that we are going to get this through the whole world with the speed that's needed. Now, we have concentrated on the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It's one of the most important documents in human history. The United Nations Secretary General has called it the Handbook for Human Survival. So if we are going to survive, we need to read this book. We can't read it as single people, we have to do it as a community. So we have to divide out the different parts of the book, work out how are we going to read this? Luckily, we now have machines, and the machines can use text and data mining and other types of mining to create knowledge. We create knowledge in universal form so that anyone in the world can access in their own language, in their own culture, for their own purposes. And that's really important. The digital revolution has been led, unfortunately, from California and other northern organizations. This gives a bias to it, which is not it's not friendly to the world, it's not friendly to India. We have to get our knowledge into this, and we need to take control of it. And I don't want to talk about surveillance capitalism, but this is one of the major issues, that the Californian companies want to control knowledge. We want to liberate knowledge so that anybody can use it. So, for example, I give you one small example. Does anyone know what stubble is? Well, burning stubble is a major problem, but in the Delhi region, you know, as paralytic, right? So that is the sort of thing that a simple machine can help with translating. Everybody understands that. So you see stubble in this report, you press the app, and the app will tell you what it means in any of the Indian languages. And that's the sort of technology that we are bringing, and we hope that you can all share in. So what we're looking for is we're looking for inspired, committed volunteers who have understood that and say, I want to be part of that. I want to help get knowledge out to a group of people that I can relate to. I mean, I say to people, if you are making a course in college, make a course in climate, because it will include everything, every discipline, physics, mathematics, astronomy, chemistry, bioscience, economics, psychology, history, law, politics. All of these are necessary so that a single course in climate would actually be a wonderful secondary or college education. So I'll leave you with that thought that we together can help to create that type of knowledge.
Thank you so much, sir. Now I would like to invite Professor Simon Worthington. Professor Worthington works on European coordination and communication for semantic climate. He's an open source software publishing technology expert as a product owner. He's a researcher for NFD14, Culture Data Publication and Projects, lead on Next Generation Books Service at TIB. I would like to invite Professor Worthington to express his thoughts. Over to you, sir.
Great, thank you. So it's really good when you have bios, and luckily in that one it missed out some bits which I want to talk about. So following on from what Peter said, and looking at the title here, like unlocking innovative solutions and around open access, democratization, and facing these challenges that we have. I suppose it's important to say I come from an open science lab in the German Research Library. German Research Library for Science and Technology. And what does that mean? We're a library that services Germany and internationally, and we cover mathematics, architecture, computer science, mathematics. Sorry, I mentioned mathematics. Engineering. But in the Open Science Lab, we have 500 employees, but we have about 150 in research. So we actually R&D open science systems and other related systems, and then turn them into products. And the library produces services which address industry, individuals, other universities, and the like. So part of talking about climate and obviously the interlocked biodiversity and sustainability, obviously. It is, these are global problems, but in essence, we do not have a global science system. Yeah, it is weighed. There are barriers. The north-south divide is hugely undemocratic, and basically not there. So part of the solutions to this is open science. So do people here do open science? Are you taught about open science? Do you pick it up? Okay, so I'll just mention a couple of things. Basically, it means making the whole of the research process, from your research, your data, to your publishing, to the reuse of the material and going back into the cycle and coming around again. Open, yeah, all of it. Openly licensed, free to use at the point of entry and at the point of use and publishing. That means your data and the like. And that's how you make innovation. That's what you can do innovation on top. We hear lots about AI, but if you don't have machine readable content or even open content that can be used, and I'm not talking about this AI that we don't need, which is products, as Peter mentioned, made by people for their reasons, not for our reasons, not to do our science or not to service people. We need that. There's too much data, there's too much science, there's too much things, too many things to be communicated. And just to give you some kind of handle on that. So as I said, we make those things. So for example, we're in architecture, we figure out how do you provide DOIs, digital object identifiers, like the kind of unit by which you identify something in the digital world as a digital object. We do that for 3D models and 3D splines, when you're doing GIS material, etc. In the area of economics, not at our library, but at the German Economics Library, they've made assisted, should I say, machine learning for how the subject specialists can ingest material. If you have 150,000 papers being circulated, I don't know the exact number, but let's say very high number per day coming into the library, it's simply not possible to filter those into your subjects. You need assisted classification that people can bring them in and make them relevant. So it's on the in and the outside. How does this relate to, I want to relate this back to semantic climate and what we are doing as a group, which I must say is an Indian-led project by Indian young scientists. As Peter mentioned, we're working with the IPCC. In November, we went to Geneva to try to meet the IPCC. We didn't actually have a full appointment, but we thought if we go there, knock on their door, and don't go away, we might get in, and we did. And that was good. So quite simply, do people here ever read bits of the IPCC reports? Is this something you use, familiar with? Okay, let's see.
A little bit.
A little bit. Yeah, well, and that's very, very fair, because it's
a component which forms a syllabus point of view.
Yeah. I think one of the reasons you're not... a very fair reason that many of you might not be reading it is that it's unreadable. Peter says it's a manual for, as Antonio Guterres says, this is the manual for survival. Oh, but you can't read it. You can't read it because they just make like a 10,000 or 3,000, I mean, there's lots of different bits of the reports, but they're huge PDFs and very, very dense, even more dense, like 5 times more dense than the scientific paper. But it's there. It's the best science. We want to respect that, and we want to look at how we can make that available for you to use. And when we talk about innovation, it doesn't always need to be some huge, complicated, expensive thing. We just want to make it into HTML, tag it with semantic meanings, which makes it searchable, which means you can find it and use it. Not, it's not rocket science. It's difficult. So this kind of innovation doesn't need to be something huge, but you can make those leaps. I think I'll just kind of, I'll finish up here, because I think I've kind of given you the kind of window into what we're doing. And so thank you. And if you ever want to know more about open science, give me a shout. Thank you.
Now I would like to request Dr. Anurag to introduce Professor Marwa Halmi.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a privilege to be part of this program on climate, biodiversity, and open access. We are delighted to have with us Professor Marwa Halmi as the next expert speaker. So, Professor Marwa is a professor of ecology at Alexandria University in Egypt. She has a diverse educational background and her expertise is in the area of invasive species and African biodiversity. Ma'am is in India on the C.V. Raman Fellowship being hosted by Dr. Yadav's lab at NIPGR. She also has been a Fulbright fellow and was awarded a grant from UNESCO as well as the Smithsonian Madison School of Conservation Scholarship. Ma'am, we are very happy to have you with us today. I would now like to request you to be on the podium.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to this event. What I would like to do today is just share with you the other side of the story. So Peter and Simon pretty much talked about climate and what we do in semantic climate and the importance of open data and how is this really important for us to just maintain our human well-being. Because why do we do research? Do you have an idea? We have graduate students here, undergraduate. So why do we do research? Why do we do science?
To find a better solution for
So that's the key problem. Sure, but at the end, what is the goal? As a human being, we are searching for our well-being, right? Yeah. So when we started to just learn that we are just not doing well with the environment, what did we do? We started to think about how to study our impact on the environment because we thought that it is impacting us, it is impacting our well-being, it is impacting our health, right? So when we just started to do this, we started to find out solutions to just, to lower the impact on our climate, right? Because we know it is bad for us as a human being. All right, so now we need to think about something else. What is the link between climate change, biodiversity, and our well-being as a human being? Is there a link? What is the link? Can anyone tell me?
students?
Climate change has very adverse effects, which is loss of biodiversity, reduction in agricultural land, that is what directly affects us.
Great. And how biodiversity impact climate change? Is there an influence?
Yes.
Yeah.
There are many such species of maybe bacteria from prokaryotes as well as eukaryotes such as plants which help to sequester carbon and thus prevent climate change. But if we are losing those species because of climate change, then it is a very adverse because there is a breaking of the chain and we cannot find any other solutions for climate change.
Okay.
If there will be climate change drastically, then ecological balance will get deteriorated or ecological imbalance will occur, which will ultimately lead to disturbance in food chain and food web, and ultimately lead to the problem in our environment.
Great. All right. Now let's think about two important things that we do as a human being that is really, really impacting our biodiversity and contributing to climate change. How about clearing forest? How clearing forest is adding to the problem of climate change? Is it adding to the problem? Yes, right? What about draining and drying wetlands? Is it adding to climate change? Yeah. Is it impacting biodiversity loss? Yes. So when we do solutions, when we think about solutions for climate change, do we have to think only about climate change, or do we have to think about other connected issues, like our impact on our natural resources, right? So, we have IPCC. We have all heard about IPCC, right? So, what they are trying to do in IPCC, anyone knows? Okay, so let me say, IPCC is an interface between science and policy. Interface between science and policy. Because those who are doing the assessment, you hear about assessment report number 1, assessment report number 2, 3, 4, and so on, right? So each time we have an assessment report, each time we have a CAP, which is Conference of Parties, people from the government just convene in a certain place and discuss the report of IPCC, right? Why they are doing this? They are doing this because they are trying to bridge the gap between science and policy. So the scientists do the assessment part, right? And they come with a synthesis of that and provide it for the policy maker, the government representative, all right? So basically IPCC, when they do their work, they do it in 2 forms. One, for the scientists, for the researchers like us, and there is another tiny summarized form, they call it SPEM, Summary for Policymaker. It's very, just summarized part. You could just go and look for that on their website and look at it. It just has some key messages for the policymaker. Why they have this for the policymakers? Because they know the policymakers cannot just, look into this report that Peter and Simon was talking about, very detailed, heavy science, okay? No one of the policymakers would just look into that and just, try to understand anything. They need the key messages. They need the key messages to tell them what is the situation, how can we improve it, what are the scenarios, what are the best options that we could go for. This is what they need in a very, succinct, reduced form, which we call it summary for policymaker, right? Okay, this is great. IPCC is doing this, and every time they have this assessment report, right, which Peter and Simon and Semantic Climate are trying to just make this available for everyone by doing it in just, very usable forms that could be used by researchers and also by the lay people as well. On the other side, we have the IPBES, which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. They are doing the same thing. They are bridging the gap between the science and policy when it comes to biodiversity and ecosystem services, which are really important for us. But we take this for granted, and when we talk about biodiversity conservation, everybody it's a luxury thing. Why should we talk about that? We should talk about that because it's really important for our human well-being. It is not a luxurious thing that we should just think about when we have extra money to spend on some just protected areas. No, it is really related to our daily life. So in these reports produced by the IPBES, which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, they have the same thing. They have the scientific reports, the very large sized reports for the scientists and researchers, which I encourage you to look into these. And so they have also the summary for policymakers. But the thing is about the IPBES, they don't have only assessment for biodiversity and that's it. They produce a couple of assessments related to different things connected to our natural resources. I'll give you an example. The first thing they did was an assessment on pollinators and pollination. Can you imagine that? Why do you think they did this? Can any one of the students tell me? Think about it. Why do we have to think about the pollinators and pollination?
For the environment purpose.
Great. But if we think from the point of view of the selfish human being, how pollination is important for us?
Food security, it is very
Great. This is what I wanted to hear. We think about pollination and pollinators because of our well-being. Think about it. Pollination is an ecosystem service that is just, for granted we take it. Pollinators do that for us. We don't do anything and they just do the pollination for us, and more than 1/3 of the food or the crops that we use in the whole world are pollinated by pollinators, right? Think about when these pollinators, for any reason, next day they are not here, they are gone. What would happen in the world? What would happen? a crisis, food crisis, right? Famine in different places, rise of the prices of the crops, okay? Maybe conflicts in some places, right? So to that point, pollination and pollinators are important. That's why in the IBBS, the first assessment was for the pollinators. And you know that a major group of pollinators are insects, right?
Yeah.
We have birds, of course, and we have different animals, but birds are, insects are the major contributor to this ecosystem service. And as we know from the records, that insects are plummeting. There was a study that was actually done on the status of insects on the world, and they concluded that the insects are plummeting. So what does that tell us about an important ecosystem service, pollination? We are in danger here, right? So we need to do something for these pollinators. They are doing us a great service, but we are doing them harm, okay? So if we try to convince policymakers with this way of thinking about how biodiversity is important, how it is related to climate crisis, how we should act because it is impacting our human well-being. Now policymakers would act. Now policymakers would take actions, right? To do that, we have to have an access for data. I tell you my experience as a researcher. When I started to do my PhD, I actually was using geospatial techniques, satellite imagery, and of course data related to occurrence of some of species in my country. For sure, I was faced by the shortage of data in my country. Of course, I'm coming from the global south. Data is not accessible, in everywhere. I needed satellite imagery. At that time, satellite imagery was very expensive. Now, we live in the era that satellite imagery are available for free. Everyone can access them now. Of course, not all of them at all the resolutions. Of course, if you need high special resolution satellite imagery, you have to pay extra money to get this. But at least, you could have some form of data accessible to you that you could use in your research and do your assessment. Now, because of satellite imagery, we can do an assessment for how much do we clear forest in this world. And we could do that on a repetitive way and know the rate of loss of biodiversity in this area, because we know, to some extent in each ecosystem how much they are contributing in terms of number of species. So if we know the loss in that ecosystem using satellite data and other forms of data, now we could know for sure how much we are losing in terms of biodiversity. So thanks to this type of data, we could do research in the global south, right? So we need to maintain ways that would allow us to use this open access data and produce them. Not only produce them, the outcomes that we get out of our research, we have to look into ways how to deliver the outcomes in a simple form to the decision makers, to get them on board with us, to help us with our causes. Because science is not just for science, it's for science and the society as well. So we need to prove to the decision maker what we are doing is valuable, it is needed, they should support this, they should support the open access to data, they should support all the research done in the different aspects, whether it is for climate change or biodiversity, because they are interconnected. So I leave it on that note, and thank you all for giving me the time to share with you.
Now I request Professor Monica Kaur to introduce Dr. Geetanjali Yadav.
Hello everyone. You know that Geetanjali is the person because of which we are having this eminent panel with us. I know Geetanjali since my graduation days. So she is a person who represents we're talking about interdisciplinary knowledge. She's the one who represents that interdisciplinary knowledge. She did her botany honors from Venkateshwara College, then went on to do biomedical sciences from B.R. Ambedkar Center from our own university. She went on to do her PhD in immunology in National Institute of Immunology. And then she has gone all over the world. She is, she's hopping from countries. I see her morning she's in Delhi and evening she's at times she's in Cambridge, Poland. She has broken that north-south divide, if I can say, in terms of sharing of the knowledge. She likes to share whatever she learns. And I've seen her, she's always available when it comes to, when it comes to capacity building especially. And she does it across the groups. Colleges, she goes to schools, can you believe it? She goes to class 8 students and talks about artificial intelligence and data science to them. She goes to government schools, and for this, I don't want to take much time because today is the day for, the panelists. So she has worked on secondary messenger, she has worked on secondary metabolites, she has worked on floral aspects. Recently, she has used a very interesting technique to understand pollen, using information sciences, using all kinds of microscopy techniques, modern microscopic techniques. So, she is trying to answer questions of science which are relevant and wherein you can use techniques across the disciplines. So, this is the kind of a requirement of today, breaking the barriers, coming out of silos, and here you have Gitanjali to say and share her insights into today's topic, and she's representing semantic on climate change today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Monica, for that kind introduction. And I always notice that Monica particularly likes to introduce me and embarrass me by telling college ke dinon se kya hal tha mera. But truly, it's been 20 years together. Monica and I have been friends longer than that, Monica, isn't it? And it's always a pleasure to come to Hansraj College. And I see a lot of other faces today whom I haven't seen after many, many years. So good to see old friends, new faces, particularly students from different subjects who have come here to listen to us today. It is a pleasure for me to stand before you and talk about semantic climate, a little global movement that we have co-founded together. Peter, myself, Simon is on the team also. The global movement is for open notebook science to transform information into structured, filtered, actionable knowledge. So when I say structured, filtered, actionable knowledge, that is exactly what my colleagues and other speakers have been talking till now. Close your eyes, think about what is the data you were working on this morning or yesterday or last week or maybe planning to work on next week. Is that data fair? Our aim is to make all data all over the world fair. When I say fair, in terms of English, your meaning of fairness is one, but our meaning of fairness is making or verifying data in the sense of F, for making data findable. The data that you want, can you find it? Do you know where it is? Is it actionable for A? Is it interoperable? When you download it from one site and when you upload it to another, do you need it to be in a different format? Then it's not interoperable. Is it reusable? If you download it today and came back a week later, would it be reusable or would it have gone redundant by then? So that's verification of data, and we believe all data in the world should be made fair. The more recent version or vision for fairness, or data fairness across the world, starting from the United Nations, going on to one of the international committees of core data of the international science unions of the world, is F for fully AI ready. So FAIR is fully AI ready. Is your data fully AI ready? It would be fully AI ready if it was findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And therefore coming back again to wanting to make your data such. Last week, the four of us were at a biodiversity field trip with Professor Ojit and his students of some universities, and we asked them, what kind of data are you working with? And some of them said, we are looking at species associations data sets, pollinator data sets, we are looking at geospatial data sets, remote sensing data. Is that data fair? Have you taken a look at it? Where do you find it? Then they say, no, most often we are generating that data. So you're generating the data, and your little research that you're doing in the thesis you're writing, in the time that you spend in college or in postgrad, When you're generating it, what are you doing with it? Is it sitting in your notebook? Is it sitting in some kind of a thesis? Is it just dumped into the library somewhere? Or is it available for the world to use because you made an effort to do something? Have you made that data available to the world? Do you know how to make your data available to the world? If somebody else has done it, do you know how to access that? All of these issues are issues we don't deal with in an increasingly digitized world where all of you are spending all of your time on the computers, on the phones, and accessing each other's social media, stuff you're doing night and day, posting about yourself. Why do you not know where the data is? Why do you not know where to access it from? So therefore, there is a gap somewhere or a niche somewhere where I think more of us academics need to get in and solve or find a solution to. And so therefore, it is especially heartening for me to be here and to see college students from different backgrounds, because it is through different backgrounds that you think we are going, but that I believe that we are going to be able to pass the message one by one, even if it takes word of mouth, to everybody. I'm Gitanjali Yadav. You've heard my introduction. I'm a data scientist at the National Institute of Plant Genome Research, New Delhi, but I also work with the Delhi City Knowledge Cluster, a cluster set up by the Principal Scientific Advisor's Office for making the national education policy trickle down to all educational institutions across the country. So there are 6 city clusters, Delhi is one. I'm on the advisory board. Our aim in this, in addition to our day jobs, which is of course to do research, is to meet students like you, try and ask you questions, make you think about how your work, your science, your future can be connected to the national missions in the country, can contribute to the country, can be connected to societal problems, rather than just that little notebook that I make my notes on and then put it into a bag somewhere or a cupboard somewhere or a library somewhere and nobody looks at it again. So it's very important to connect with society, and that is why the clusters are there, that is why we are there, that is why we think about what we might do. And AI above all, in an increasingly digitized world, how many of you are aware of AI? Well, everybody is and everybody is using, of course, but how many of you have yourself any understanding of different ways in which AI is used or what AI itself is? And I'd like to see a show of hands, but not just now, don't bother about it. I will talk to you a little more eventually. So we try to put together AI and climate change together. We are all data scientists. Climate change is of course a complex problem with dimensions which are not only in the physical, natural, social sciences, but equally so in humanities, arts and policy. And therefore, climate change is an urgent interdisciplinary issue, and addressing it requires interdisciplinary collaboration across these silos of subjects that most often we find ourselves locked in, or barriers of culture, cost policy that we get stuck in. And these barriers prevent knowledge from flowing across between people. Within semantic climate, we believe in making knowledge freely accessible to all. So our premise in semantic climate, again, is that every citizen has to be able to read climate information. When I say read, I'm assuming fair, that you have been able to find it, and because you're reading it, you can make it actionable as well. That the full breadth of all knowledge about climate must be made immediately and openly available to everyone, because openness is a powerful accelerant for finding solutions to the most pressing challenges on the planet. A central activity that we have in semantic climate is, of course, to liberate climate knowledge and make it accessible to the world. And so what we have done between Peter, Simon, myself, and a huge group of interns in India and outside India, with a big network, we've created a proof of concept toolkit. That toolkit was what Simon was also telling you about earlier. This toolkit uses AI over NLP. Anybody knows what is NLP? AI to sab jante hain. What is NLP? Yes, I tend to use NLP so often, but he's clapping. It means natural language processing, and that's something that each one of you, including school kids, Monica was right, absolutely. I was with class 6 and class 8 kids yesterday, and they were making these little handbooks, reports, annual deep dive club ka report. And I told them, ye report mere haath mein print karke page phad ke kyun de rahe ho? Might as well use some AI, do something, build it on a publishing portal and show it to me as a URL, as a digital object identifier, and they're just staring at me, digital object identifier kya hota? So they will know if I tell them, and I will tell them because the national education policy says that AI has to be in schools. But in schools, the teachers, because people don't understand what it is to teach when you're talking about AI, they are thinking about data science, thoda sa statistics, thoda sa computer, thoda sa keyboard sikha denge to AI. That's not AI. AI truly is all-encompassing, but what the national education policy wants to do is to make every child adept at being able to not just run their own AI, but also modify that. And it is not impossible. It's a very doable thing to do. And so therefore, this is our toolkit that uses AI over NLP to transform locked literature, such as the IPCC reports, to help, or the entire scholarly corpus into semantic hypermedia form. And this conversion of some kind of literature into semantic hypermedia form is a non-trivial task. We keep insisting it's trivial because we want you to do it, but technically behind the backs, it is not a trivial task. It is something that has haunted developers for the past 30 years. But with the advent of deep learning, transformers, large language models, generative AI, it has now become possible to do it, and therefore it is within holding distance of all of us. And our semantic toolkit therefore makes the IPCC report accessible, processable for machines, embedded in the global knowledge graph, directly connected to the wiki, and thereby embedded into multilingual resources. And our toolkit is a one-click, therefore, this is something Peter said somewhere, and I just made a note in my notes. It is a one-click semantic encyclopedia for climate, and we have essentially, we have made a semantic prosthetic, is what he had said. What Peter said was that we have created a semantic prosthetic that every person can use and do something about climate. And our reason, therefore, for being here today is to engage with you, of course, first of all, but also it is one additional step forward to meet our objective of bringing climate data and climate knowledge to everyone. Secondary school kids, local councillors, senior citizens, pastoral people, crop growers, teachers, students, undergrads, postgrads. And we've been doing it at a very small scale for many years. It's a drop in the ocean, but every drop counts. Even if one of you hears us today and feels, okay, let me go back and find out if fair data kya hota hai, and let me see if I can do a little internship with these people, they keep harping about semantic climate. That's great for us, because we've been able to connect you. So what we do within Semantic Climate is, first of all, we're not a startup, we're not a company, we are not going to be that also. We're just academic volunteers, passionate about, we all have our day jobs, so we're passionate about climate and about the planet, and we do things in our free time, and that's what we want you to do with us if you have the time. So there's no profit, no hope for any long term. Maybe if we improve the world and more people can live in it for a longer time, then that is profit for everybody together. But within Semantic Climate, we do research in open access, democratization, sustainability, but above all, AI over NLP. B, internships. Internships are from 4 weeks to 12 months. You're welcome to come and work with us in my lab, online, sitting at home. If you have a day job, it's not only for students, it's for anybody who's a professional and says, I want to do something for climate. Stay at home, work with us. We meet every day, literally for 1 hour, but you're welcome to work with us at your own convenience. We do hackathons and challenges. Hackathons are challenges where you take a question in climate and resolve it using our toolkit. So we train you in our toolkit. In addition, there's the workshops and panels like this and discussions with students that we do. Other than that, we do a lot of outreach. We went to schools last week, yesterday. We also went to the Sabarmati Ashram and met citizens. We also went to Delhi mein ye communities, outskirts pe there are Chandanhola communities, and there are underprivileged communities where we met children and students and talked to them about climate. So there's a lot of stuff we do, and you're welcome to join us in all of these things because we're doing it voluntarily. You're welcome to work with us. And above all, what we've recently started to do is to build games. And so we've invented a snakes and ladders for climate. We've invented a matchmaking card game for climate. We've invented Peter and Simon and we all and our interns. We've invented new things which we think we can get students to be engaged in, and they read on the card something to do about climate and they can make a change there. So these are the things that we do. We believe that these things, or the semantic climate efforts, will be of interest to many of you in the attendees. In particular, now that universities are starting to run courses on climate, compulsory courses on climate, this hypermedia tool that we have built within Semantic Climate, we believe that it could be a free educational resource that you could use in your college, in your university for education, and we are very happy to collaborate. And it's open source and it's free, and there's nothing that it costs. And I also want to emphasize that Semantic Climate is designed that the barrier to entry is zero. If you felt you have no background prior knowledge, you still would be very precious to us because it's one more person wanting to do something about climate. We are a very flat organization. We value a wide range of experiences and skills. We welcome you to work with us as volunteers or as interns after having met us on an occasion such as today. And With that, I will say thank you. Because this book is what I've been gifted just now, and I think Jaishankar is so right and so much to the point when he says change is the only constant, and that we've got to all of us think in the context of history and tradition, appropriate for a civilizational power like India that seeks to reclaim its place on the world stage. This is incredible because the entire semantic toolkit has been built by Indian young students, working of course with the rest of the world, sitting here with us, 4 nations today. But honestly, we are reclaiming our place in the world, and we can break this cycle of neocolonialism together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your encouraging words. Now I would like to request Professor Monica Call to again on dais for a panel discussion.
First of all, I request the students to ask the questions. I hope you have understood the essence. We are talking about research to be accessible to everyone. We are talking that we should not be paying for the data, and we should also understand what it is. At times, you have lectures and people show graphs and you're not able to decipher. So we're talking about all those things. I am sure, Professor Halami talked about conservation, she talked about biodiversity and how every organism is so important, and she particularly talked about an ecosystem service offered by a pollinator. So then, we had Dr. Peter talking about the accessibility of knowledge and how vernacular words at times create barriers. Why should stubble be such a different thing for a lady who is working in the field, and her problems are being discussed at the international platform. Stubble burning is a topic which India is tackling, and it's trying to confront it through various means, but still she doesn't understand what IPCC talks about stubble. So having those vernacular words, that language dictionary accessible, everyone can be a part of it. We have college where we have students coming from Tripura to Kashmir to Kanyakumari to Mizoram to all parts of India, Madhya Pradesh, Central India, all across. So you can contribute by giving your own dictionary meanings to their toolkit. So this is what they're looking for. So with this, I think you may have certain questions in mind. I also have some questions which have been sent by some of the students here, which have just reached me. But before that, I want some of you to ask the questions.
If we will make, please introduce yourself, tell us your name, what you're doing, which college you're in, we would like to know. My name is Sneha. Currently, I am pursuing BSc in Life Science, second year. My question is this, basically, if data will be that much easily available, there will be more chances of data piracy. So what we will do about that? Data piracy will be...
So what do you mean by data piracy? If the data belongs to the whole world, what is piracy? Data is infinitely reproducible, so nobody can steal it. The problem comes when you don't make your data available, and then it is enclosed by some other capitalist organization who says you have to pay for it. So making data free means no data piracy. Does that make sense?
But maybe what you wanted to ask was, what if somebody starts to make you pay for the data which is freely available somewhere because you've made it available here, others don't know about it. There's a huge problem with ignorance on the planet. Ignorance is not bliss, but because I know where that data sits, I charge you for it, and that's a profit-making effort which is not fair. And that is not piracy, but that's something that can happen and does.
Yes, so to counter that, you have to put effort into making many copies across the world, and so...
Even more, make it freer and freer,
yes,
and freer still.
Many free copies, and then people will always know that it's free. It's hard work, but it can be done.
So my question is that how can, as most of us are students, undergrad students, how can we contribute to make data fair?
Well, I'm not the only person to answer here.
You can
I think
take
you.
No, we will all speak about it. You, as a college student, my suggestion would be: do you have internships in your college? Do you do any small research while you're a college undergrad student?
Yes.
Do you do it only in your final year, or second year, or first year, or every year?
I think it is accessible for all these students from all the years.
So students from all the years do summer internships. Whereabouts do you do it? Where do you go? Do you go outside the college to do it?
Ma'am, we are encouraged to go outside the college as well as we have programs
Within the college. So does anybody, okay, a side question, has anybody applied for the Summer Research Fellowship Program of the Indian Academy of Sciences? It's been running for 25 years. It pays you to do summer research, and it sends you to any one of the top labs, 3,000 labs in the country. This is a program on which more than 40,000 students across the country are applying. There will be no response to every individual, but there is a submission portal, and especially for your problems, if you encounter a problem, there's another portal. So you have to know emails, you have to send through the portal. And because I'm on the program for more than 15 years, the thing that I've noticed is somehow it's the Delhi University students who I don't see there, not as winners, not even as applicants. What is it about Delhi University students? I'll tell you, they're the toppers in the country. What else is it about the Delhi University students? They're the top on swag, they're the top on style, they're the top on caliber. Then what else is it about the Delhi University students? Oh, the other thing is that they are entitled and they think that हमें कोई आके बता दे और सिल्वर प्लेटर पे दे दे, हम खुद क्यों जाके देखें? Professor, teachers, सारे के सारे यहाँ बैठे हैं, कोई आके हमें बता दे क्या करना है? Why should you be entitled just because you're in the top university and you're the best student in the world? Why should you not be aware of the opportunities that only Manipal students are taking every time, year after year after year? Why are we giving these thousands of fellowships?
So we have some students earlier who had been a part of Arjun, was a summer research fellow.
Matlab, you can think of a name, Monica. One name you can think that is a bad sign. There should be इतने सारे बच्चे कि हमें पता ही नहीं और सारे apply कर रहे हैं. Why are all of you now? How many of you have applied for the Khurana program, which can only be applied in the pre-final year, and it is for you to go for 12 weeks fully funded to Harvard, Yale, MIT, any lab in the US, one of 75 labs in the US, where scientists are Indians who want Indian students to come to them. Did you know about that? Yes. Did you apply to that? Yes. No. Did you win it? Of course you won't win it if you don't apply. Only top scorers get it, but you're the top scorers, you're the best students in the country. Why are you not aware of the Khurana program? Raman Charpak, who wants to go to France and do a summer internship? Arey chodo, do some internship. Okay, so leave aside that ignorance issue. My point is, if you're doing an internship, and to answer his question in a nice way, is that if you do an internship, you probably generate some data or use some data. These days, because there is less time and there's so much digitization, your supervisor will potentially say कि जाके download कर लो. अगर species data है तो GBIF से download कर लो. अगर genetic data है तो GenBank से download कर लो. अगर protein data है तो PDB, RCB से download कर लो. So that data is available in spaces which are cleanly, neatly formatted, and it's fair data because it's an international repository. India का data है. अगर आपको India का data generate करना है या देखना है, so I realize that when you have to generate the data, you're not depositing it in any of these major repositories. The only time you put your data into the major repositories is when you're publishing. Publishing is a far-off place, but you've generated this data. It's your data. You went out into the field, you saw 2 pollinators, you saw a plant. Did you make a report of that? Yes, you did, but in your notebook. Is that fair? No. But do you know what to do with this? Probably not. Sadly, you don't, because we don't teach you digital literacy. We don't teach you digital skills because it's not part of the curriculum in India at all. National education policy में लिखा है लेकिन तुमको क्या करना है? कोई भी. So what we can do is, I can talk maybe another day, Monica. I can come and talk about small semantic packages, something called nano publications. आप बाहर गए, research किया 1 हफ्ते का, 2-3 pollinators देखे, simple example, कुछ पेड़ देखे, कोई location देखा, GPS coordinates नोट किए. Please record. Do you not have an ORC ID? Facebook ID सबके पास होगा, Twitter ID भी. Orchid ID किसके पास है? Orchid ID is a research ID. So Orchid ID is an ID which represents your research identity. You should have it at the beginning of time, even if you don't have papers. A lot of papers, people think कि paper publish करने पे Orchid ID मिलता है. नहीं. Orchid ID आपका identity है. उसके basis पे आप जहाँ भी कुछ publish कर रहे हो, that becomes connected to you digitally. To your name digitally, even if you get married later, change your name, your Orchid ID remains the same, and that's therefore a good thing to have. If you don't have one, create one today. It's more important than a social media ID. But once you have the Orchid ID and you see these plants and pollinators and GPS location, So that's species, that's location and geolocation. Put it as a nano publication. A nano publication is a digital object identifier, fair data, in which you say मैंने ये वाला पंछी या ये वाला insect इस जगह पे, इस पौधे पे, इस फूल पे बैठे हुए देखा था. And you put it individually, this species, this place, this time, this date, spatial temporal fair data. And that DOI becomes your publication. It's not कि मैंने paper publish किया. Let's get over the business of the Victorian era of publishing papers only जो 15 पेज से कम हुए तो बात नहीं बनी उनकी. So let's have this nano public. You guys are smart. You guys are the new age. Publish nano publications. Come to me with your CV. I should see 55 nano publications, maybe 550 nano publications, because in your summer internship you found some interesting data. And that's one. I would also like to say, and yes, I'll give you a chance after that. Posters. All of you go and present posters at national, local, regional places. Do you ever keep that poster permanently in your pocket? There's no chance. Do you leave it in the institute somewhere to rot? Maybe. Can't you just publish it online as a digital object identifier? If you wanted to, where would you do that? Does anybody know where to publish a poster? Simon is going to tell you.
Yeah, you do it, one option is you do it on a service called Zenodo.
Yes.
And Zenodo is run by CERN in Switzerland, and it's a repository where you can mint free DOIs for any digital object you make, so your presentations, your posters. And I think
PowerPoints also?
PowerPoints,
Posters also?
protocols
also?
posters, working papers, preprints, anything digital that you make. So why I was kind of like getting the mic from Gita was to say that open science is the way you make things open, and for the purpose of what has been talked about here today in different ways, but it's also the way that you get the proper reward for your work. Yeah, like in open science and in many universities around the world, they're not using the impact factor, they're not using the H-index, because those are arbitrary measures which encourage what are called kind of bad incentives. Yeah, you've got to get them, sure, but sorry?
Ghost authorships, ghost publications,
yeah,
free of charge.
Yeah, so what alternatives, so there's an agreement called the DORA agreement, which is the research assessment, Declaration of Research Assessment. So that's universities, their senates take this on board and they agree to it, and they say we will not use these arbitrary measures. We will actually look at them by different measures. I can't quite remember the ways, but it's really to say we need to do this differently. Now, obviously, you can't control that, but what you can do is you can get attribution for the code you make, you can get attribution for your posters, and if you're not getting those attributions now and going for some H-index, that doesn't matter. That's not going to matter in the future. You've got to get those DOIs, PIDs, the rest of it, then you're visible, you know? Otherwise, yeah, so.
Do it today, do it now.
Respected teachers and respected professors, I am Kashi and I am currently doing my bachelor's in zoology honors from Ramjas College. I am in my second year. So my question is, a human is a curious being. So if data is always freely available and easily accessible, just a click away, will it not kill the curiousness and in a way make people lazy to do their own research?
That's a good question. No, availability of data will never kill curiosity. Never, ever. First off, availability of data would allow so many people to do research on the available data. I told you about a problem I was having as a researcher, and I am not alone. All people on the global south was facing the same thing, particularly for spatial data. Now, before, when I started my research, there was no, climate data available like a spatial layer for everyone. Only people who just know in the global north, they have climate data available. But because of the availability of something like world climate data, I was able to do some research doing spatial distribution models on the species I have in my country. So thanks to this kind of data, which actually is based on data collected throughout the world and made available to everyone to use through an online platform. If it was not available for me, I would never be able to do my research work. right? Now we have also the availability of the climate scenarios data as a spatial layer, so people could just, forecast what would happen in the future for that species and this species and so on, right? If this data is not available, would we be able to do that on the global south? No, right? But we will not stop generating data. Now in the era of the big data, right? We need more tools to process our data because we keep generating data around the clock. Now we have tools like the satellites, available everywhere now, doing the surveys, providing us with data around the clock, right? We have near real-time data, and also archive data at our disposal that we could use and process. All right, it just need someone who is just curious and do the research and everything, right? But we will not stop generating data. A human being will not stop generating data. So you would never think ever that we will stop curiosity. We would not just stop searching everywhere. And for your information, we didn't explore our ecosystem on the globe yet. We have still some areas that we need to explore. Yes, I'm talking about satellite imagery and what it could do for us, but still we have areas that we need to explore. So we still need to generate data, we still need to go everywhere and just, be curious as much as we can. So this is my just thought on that.
Does that answer your question? It does?
No.
Okay. Yes, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Lakshmi. I am a mathematics honors student, third year, Hansraj College itself. So my question is adding to what ma'am said right now. This is the era of big data. We're generating data every day more and more. And like I guess Professor Simon asked you some other question that to make data fair, we will need to store multiple copies in multiple places to avoid corruption, which will mean more computers, more technology, which will mean more emissions and which will be adding to the carbon footprint. So how would we counter that problem?
That's a really good question. So I hope everybody realizes that computing generates heat, right? So processing information takes heat. Now, one of the problems we have is that this is not very well distributed throughout the world. So if you have a system where everybody is getting something from a server, that means that the server is generating huge amounts of heat and they're melting up, they're building their data centers under the ice and melting the ice and so on. On the other hand, if everybody is downloading the data and computing it locally, then you have a different type of heat generation, and we have to balance up the active energy either through solar energy or some other thing against the heat generated. I would say that this is a difficult problem. I don't know the answer, but at the moment I don't think this is well planned. I think that too many people are doing the same thing, so there is no reason, for example, to download all the world's information every time you want to search it. It may be more efficient to have a local node of that and so on. But I don't know the answer. It's a very good question.
So I'd like to just add, first Simon, please. Then
I think there were three things involved.
Yes.
One, of course, you've heard of BitTorrent, yeah? Yeah,
have you used BitTorrents before India shut it down?
No. It's a distributed file system, so you can economize in that way. The other one is you need to build data centers next to continuous hydro systems.
Yes.
Yeah, they can be more energy efficient. And there's a really interesting area of what is called open energy modeling, and that's about a whole array of things around energy, but I think it relates really importantly to that.
My only point in that was that very recently about 23 countries of the world, or data scientists from 23 countries, got together at Leiden University for a week to discuss open distributed systems, how we could bring down the energy utilization of wanting to do so much digital work and wanting to move much beyond paper, making paper, burning paper, fuels, by being able to digitize much of what we've got, but do it in a way that is sustainable, and that brings sustainability into the conversation. And these two have already told you that open systems, open distributed systems, where each one of us, where the servers for Google, for example, they're not sitting in one place. The servers for Google are distributed out to a lot of places. The PDB, for example, has 6 different mirrors that you can choose from. If you download a gene or even a few genes or proteins, you have to choose one of 56 different mirrors, and you generally choose one that's closer to yourself for lesser energy to be spent. You could choose the Californian mirror, but you choose one here. We don't have a mirror for the PDB in India, but we are thinking of bringing that also. But there is a way to overcome that. A lot of people were saying, for example, 10 years ago, wasn't there a big deal about biofuels? Biofuels can change everything about the fuels in the climate. It turns out now that biofuels are guzzling much more to even be created. And so the algal biofuels that all of us, I went in so heavily for that. I bought algal biomass shoes, and I would go about flaunting everything that I'm fully for the planet. And I discover now suddenly that, biofuels take more guzzled energy in creating these huge plants that have to put together, and the kind of energy they're giving back is not the same. But that's only becoming clear now, 10 years after the world has moved to that. Zillions of gazillions of crores have been pumped into that research. We make mistakes, we go in cycles and make mistakes, but it is true that digitization, I am not for Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I know they're doing great stuff, but he is a chip seller, and he will tell you digitize, but you're basically buying his computers. I am not a Windows guy, so that's a different story. There are all sorts of games at play over here, but you have to be aware of the balance within that. Does that answer your question, my dear? It does. There was a question at the back. Yes, please.
Good evening, everyone present. Myself Hansraj Singh from Tirunelveli College. I'm pursuing my botany honors first year. So my question is, there's too much data. Okay, as respected panelist said, we are generating data and data and data. So to clear my context, in Cold War, what US spies and Russian spies did, they used to put Bacillus anthracis spores in their letters, which they used to exchange for giving intels. So it used to act as a bioweapon. So what I want to ask here is that if too much data is available, can it be bioweaponized?
Surveillance capitalism is a kind of weapon. You spoke about it all day today. That's because too much data. The photos you click, the selfies you take, the Google searches you make, the YouTube videos you watch, the keyboard you click, everything is being recorded. And yes, it is being snooped upon. You're being snooped upon, but he's the guy to talk about surveillance capitalism.
I think the biggest misuse of energy is crypto, the gambling on new currencies whose primary purpose is an organized lottery across the world.
Does everybody know what he's talking about? What?
Bitcoin.
Yes, Bitcoin.
And other things of that kind.
Yeah. So capitalism uses a huge amount of energy. It involves competition, and so there is waste there. I wasn't quite sure. You said that this additional data was a bioweapon.
Yeah, I want to
He's saying that can this open access to data and information available on various organisms, for example?
I see.
You have DNA recorded for an organism. Can it be used for bioterrorism?
So now we come to a difficult problem that the scientific world is addressing. What data should be closed and who should control the closing of the data? So at one end of the spectrum is data everybody can share, which data about fundamental science and so on. At the other end, we have data on human subjects, and everyone agrees that that should not be freely distributed. It can only be used by responsible people. Another one is on local traditional communities where their data has been misused in the past. There are data on rare species, things of that sort, nesting sites for birds. Again, this should be protected. So it's a difficult area, and I think the best we can say is that most scientists are responsible and they care very much about this, but it is still being worked out and it will always be a problem.
And can I ask a second question?
Yeah.
How much data is too much data? Like even if we are talking about DNA replication, it's still a faulty process. At some places the bases are changed, which tries to give like mutation and variation. So how much data is too much data, and how will a large language model such as ChatGPT or the NJI, whatever that, these things are like, how they are able to handle these large amount of data? Because if even like as a common person we will start pumping our own data into the whole set of like the big data that there is. So how much data is too much data for an AI to handle?
There is not too much data for an AI to handle at all. We have not been able to give even 1/10 or one minuscule fraction of the data to an AI to learn on. But what kind of servers do we have today on the planet that can ingest the kind of data that we have? One minuscule fraction of data, and we still don't have enough servers that can handle that. But the answer to your question is, you won't will generate the data. You are already generating the data in everything that you leave a digital signature all the time, everywhere. But to answer your question would be, I recently met the Corbett field director, and he's got these years and years of data, which is image trapping, the camera traps data in the Corbett National Park and all national parks of India. And they use that for various reasons. And when I discovered that he's got this data for 10 years, I said, the tigers in the Corbett, we could map their movement, we could tell you. Human-wildlife conflict is a very serious issue in national parks of India. So they want to protect the wildlife, but when they go to the गाँव जो side में लोग रह रहे हैं, उनके बैल, goats and sheep उनको खा जाते हैं. So human-wildlife conflict is very bad. And if we had access to the camera traps data, then a person like me could just do modeling on the imaging and tell you that these certain tigers are more and more expanding their range and getting to the borders, and that will lead to more conflict. They could prevent it. So he said, great, let's do this research, let's write a collaborative project. I write the project, and then they said, हाँ ठीक है, पहले आप आ जाओ, हमें सिखाओ कैसे करना है. I said, आपको थोड़ी सिखाएंगे, you're already working there, you give me the data, I'll work on it. He says, no, we can't give you the data, it's protected, we can't share it. And I'm like, but we've written something, we can share it. He says, we can't share it because now I'm somebody who wants to share data, we are about open. And then he comes back to me saying, Gitanjali, we make it shared, and then poachers come in and they map it and they know where the tiger is and they grab the tiger. And he's right, he's absolutely right. This is like nesting bird, we can't make that data available. I mean, there will always be, or do you get the point? It's a complexity. There will always be something, because we are sheer numbers, we are humans, and there will always be a different way of thinking, and you don't want the world to think in the same way. There should be diversity, right? If there's diversity, there will be two modes of thinking. If there are two modes of thinking, there's no single answer. So there are multiple answers is my view, but if you want to take it as Simon, you want to take that about large data and it's being used. Does that answer something of what? It's complex, but I'm liking that you have these questions.
If too much data is available on the internet, then it will lead to more and more confusion among a student like me. If I want to do a project on something, then on a single topic there are many data. If someone is providing and another is providing the different data on the same concept, then it will lead to a more confusion.
Which is why we teach the semantic toolkit. But Samuel, you want to take that, I think, yes.
Yeah, you can. I mean, one, you can look for authoritative sources.
Yes.
Two, technically, you can provide cryptographic IDs about the data. So if you're unsure, it could be cryptographically proven that this is a source. Those things are not always that well implemented, but they will need to be, as you were talking about. It's even hard now. I mean, I work in a library and I see what people do with, I'm not talking about my library, but generally across the board, there's still a lot of manual intervention in cataloging stuff and just complicated things. And I'm advocating using Zenodo and DOIs. What you see about the behavior of using DOIs is that no one fills out all the other data that's quite important. They just put in the stuff they have to, like the 5 fields. Okay, so yeah, there's ways to do it, but it's a kind of arms race.
So if I can come back on that, I think this idea of too much data is a very important one. Thank you for bringing it up. So we have to recognize that data is huge. So in semantic climate, as I say, you know, the IPCC's data, which is probably 1% of data on climate, stretches this far. It would fill this room if you printed it out. And there is no escape from that. We must have this data because the answer is in there. So one of the things we have to be able to do is to filter this data for our own purposes. Searching the data in different directions is really important. I think part of your question was two things. One is duplication. So when you've got data which appears to be the same data, but it is there are differences between, yes, that's a real problem, how you find the authoritative data, and you need to be able, as automatically as possible, to go back to the source and say, well, it came from here, but this group has added some fields or whatever, which are apparently distorting it or whatever. So that's one, and the major data centers, and bioscience has done incredibly well in data centers. Protein structure, DNA sequences, RNA sequences, diseases, metabolism, all sorts of things. The biosciences have done extremely well, and they work together. So there is no conflict between the data sets. The only problem is where you host them. Another problem, however, I think you're thinking of is noise. You have a data set and it was collected for one purpose, and it's not necessarily your purpose, and you have to try and find your bit of data out of it. So let us say that somebody is looking at, I'm making this up, mortality in birds, right? So there's a big reduction in birds at the moment. We will find all these records of birds in gardens, in forests, on the sea, and so on, and they all be taken by different people with different purposes, and it can be really quite difficult to find the central bit of data that you want, and that's just part of the aspect of data science. Data is collected for a purpose normally, and it isn't the purpose that you want, and you have to try and make use of it.
I think we have had lots of questions. If you can permit one last question. The question is, since you are semantic, you are representing a group which is self-motivated, you using your own time, your own money, you came here free, we didn't pay anything. I mean, this is such a important thing. You know, I don't think that this happens very often in India. It is very rare that people will come and share their knowledge.
We call it volunteering.
Yeah, volunteering. So,
volunteering.
The question is, what role can open source communities like Semantic Climate play in addressing biases and ensuring inclusivity in AI algorithms used for climate change and sustainability research?
Wow. What a great question.
I don't know what is the source, but the question is, what role can open source communities like Semantic Climate play in addressing biases and ensuring inclusivity in AI algorithms used for climate change and sustainability research?
Well,
let's begin from you, Simon.
Yeah. I'll
Each
make
one
one
of us
quick
has to
contribution.
answer it. Yes.
Okay, so so what my view is that open science is in its third decade. First decade, it was like, wow, we've got the internet, we've got computers, we can make all this data free, science can be out there. Second decade was like, oh, we don't have the infrastructure to do that. We can't actually do that. How do we do that? That's where all these policies, agreements, DOIs, PIDs, research data management, that didn't exist 10 years ago. Research data management, it wasn't formalized in these ways. It's been learned. But we're now in the third decade, which has really been about understanding knowledge justice, knowledge equity, recognizing a whole variety of issues about who has access to knowledge, who can act on it, who has power over it. And this is why it's not just questions of global north, global south. It can be about neurodiversity, it can be about gender, it can be about a whole variety of things. But those are the things, that's what's been added to open science now. So there's a lot of things to pick up on there, I think, that are running already.
So I'm going to mention 2 or 3 organisations which are global, which have tackled this problem. So about 30 years ago, probably I would say catalysed by Tim Berners-Lee and the World Wide Web, there was a realisation that human knowledge could be gathered and distributed in huge amounts. And how are you going to manage it? So Tim said, everything that has been done on the World Wide Web technology is for all humankind. And that's a tremendous gift, because there are many people who would have tried to patent it or whatever, but by making it open, it meant that you had an open community on it. So one open community is around the World Wide Web itself. The second one I will mention is Wikipedia and Wikimedia, which is, I think, the greatest knowledge achievement, probably, certainly of this century. And Wikimedia has a wide range of different activities. It has volunteers in every city, every country. I would say that I don't think that India is represented quite, you have 1 billion people, but you don't have the contribution to Wikimedia that you should have. We find, for example, translations of languages of articles into all sorts of languages, but very little. Often look for Hindi, look for Kannada, look for Telugu. There aren't articles, so it needs the volunteers to do it. And the third one, 2 sentences, is the Open Knowledge Foundation, which started in Cambridge in about 2002 and has spread around the world, is to make sure that data is, the discussion of data is open to everyone. So all of these are bottom-up, community regulated processes. So these problems of differential access are dealt with by a world community, and they take into account things like marginalized communities and so forth. The Dalits in this country, the native people of South America and so on, are underprivileged by default. And these communities are actually working to make sure that they get representation.
Margaret, would you like to talk about open communities?
Well, what I see that the open source community could do actually, they are already doing this, but maybe they need to be more open about it and reach to different areas and different avenues. I think raising awareness about the importance of open source data would do that. But as Peter mentioned, more volunteers are needed to just get their hand in and start to modify and just add to the development of the sources available. Because open source community already, they are making all of their products out in the open for everyone to modify. So there is no barrier here for anyone who wants to be included. But I think more awareness of the availability of these resources might just solve part of the problem. If we are talking about what should be done in the field of climate change, for example, my thought about that is we need to advocate for the inclusion of the open source community in developing open source climate model, because right now what we are dealing with is a couple of climate models that are available in the world. They are produced by specific institutes, they are quite a black box for everyone. We know about their outcomes, we know about their forecasting and what would happen in the future as they tell us every now and then, but not the whole community of researchers who are interested in knowing about how these models are working, know exactly how these models are working. So if the open source community would just reach out to these centers around the world, and they are pretty known, and just tell them to open the sphere for researchers to just get engaged and know how these models are working, and let researchers just contribute to that. I think we should now get the full out of involving different researchers into that, and the more we do that, I think the more inclusive these climate models would be.
My answer to the question about how open communities can lead to less bias is going to be with two examples. One is that the National Science Foundation of the United States decided suddenly some years ago that all of human medicine, all of data that we are generating, the omics data, transcriptomes and genomes, should be made publicly available for anybody to use. And that became very useful during the pandemic. But because of the Human Transcriptome Project, you might be knowing the HUGO, the Human Genome Project, but there's also the Human Transcriptome Project and the Human Microbiome Project, the how many microbiomes are there? The gut microbiome, the cheek microbiome, the vaginal microbiome, the N numbers of microbiomes, the buccal microbiomes that you have. These 30 microbiome data sets were made available on the human microbiome data, so everybody in the world could work on that. And then because they became open, and the first thing the open community then realized was, जब सारा का सारा data एक जगह डाला, तो पता चला 99.9, there's enormous amounts of data, जिसको आप too much बोल रहे हैं. But 99.99% of that human quote-unquote data is coming from the United States of A, or the United K, or somebody else in Europe. Is it? And where are the people? Where is the too much people in population where the humans are? That's in the global south. That's in Southeast Asia. That's right here with us. These data sets, there is no transcriptomic data or metagenomic or microbiomic data. And we speak about, yeah, there's so much data. I'm going to use it for my research. I might use it for my research, but that's not my population. That's not the communities I'm trying to serve. And that bias would not have been clear to the Indian government had that open foundation not made that data public. Less than 1% data was from India. Based on that, 3 years ago, the Indian government let out calls, DST calls, DBT calls, Indian microbiomes. Let's start sequencing them. We now have more data, but we don't have processes. We don't want to submit them back to the open foundation. The issue is whoever is generating it in India wants to keep it here, and the ICMR is the main contingent there. They don't want to make that data publicly available, again with very similar questions as undergrads ki piracy ho jayegi, koi le jayega, koi steal kar lega. That's not going to happen, but that data is not easy to be shared, and across the globe barriers are rising where people don't want to share their data. So it will remain in an Indian repository, Indian biomolecular repository, which has been set up by the government. It's right here in Faridabad at the Regional Center for Biotechnology. All of the data is being submitted there, but it is now being generated, and only because that bias was noticed some years ago when an open foundation made all the data public. That's for many open foundations, how they make data, these biases evident. What we have done in Semantic was, when we first began in 2020, when the pandemic struck, I was traveling to Cambridge almost very regularly because I was teaching there for the term time, coming back to India because my kids and family was here, going back to Cambridge to teach, then coming back to India. And then the pandemic struck and I got stuck in one place. And we felt, all right, we can now consistently work online. Everybody moved online. But a lot of students, the Summer Research Fellowship Program, jiske baare I was harping so much, the Indian academies decided to shut it down. कहाँ भेजेंगे बच्चों को? भेज नहीं सकते. So the Summer Research Fellowship Program was the first to be shut down in 2020, again in 2021. But the Department of Science and Technology in Rajasthan, where rural students were being brought to colleges in Jaipur, colleges in Bardmer, colleges in Jodhpur, which was so big and cosmopolitan for these rural kids, even that got shut down. And then they called us, and I was part of the Indian National Young Academy of Science at that time, the INYAS, where they said, can you guys take one student each so that our rural students don't feel blocked completely. So all of us 100 people on the INYAS decided to take one student each, and I was telling Peter about it online, and he said, can I take 2 of such students also? And then he said, can Simon, can others? Within Semantic Climate, we took 10 interns from rural Rajasthan at the turn of the pandemic. We trained them for 8 weeks, and kya bol rahi thi main? We trained them for 8 weeks, and one of them, they didn't have laptops, these are poor children from students, they're good, but they don't have laptops, and we are all data scientists, we are working with workstation in service. Suddenly we found that there's somebody sitting in rural Rajasthan who doesn't have a computer. But that guy said, all of your code, आप लोग जो भी tech कर रहे हैं, AI, NLP, ये सब इंग्लिश में है, और मैं इसको हिंदी में ट्रांसलेट कर सकता हूँ, because मेरे पास ट्रांसलेटर है मेरे फोन पे. That was the first time when Peter said that is a bias. We've been writing our code because obviously coding is in the world's language of English. And science, this boy from Rajasthan, Dheeraj Kumar, who is now doing a PhD at IIT Roorkee, from that time in 2020, he said, can I translate for you guys? On my phone I can do no more tech, no more NLP, no more AI, but can I convert your code into Hindi? And then Peter said, all right, you make it Hindi or Rajasthani, but then we have 10 other interns from South India, from Bengal, and they will all be also doing it, and everybody agreed to do it. And we removed the bias on a very small drop in the ocean scale, because we are an open community. Do you remember that, Pete?
Absolutely.
I'm telling them in Hindi about what we did about Hindi.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think there was a lot of brainstorming, and I mean, it deserves a great round of applause. One thing which I want to tell you, you might see the audience is less, but this is the audience who actually, we told them that they should come on their own volition. So they are here because they wanted to be here.
It's a room full,
So,
Monica.
so everybody, I think, also agrees to be a part of the semantic. So that is the commitment we have here in this group, and we have teachers from Khalsa College, Indrajit ma'am is here. We have students from Kirodimal College. You had talked to KMC, Renu ma'am has sent some. We have students from Ramjas, Dr. Ojit is here. Hi Mona Lisa. Mona Lisa is here. Mona Lisa is heading biodiversity an NGO. And she spoke here.
Tell us about yourself, Mona. Please come.
Yeah, Mona, please come.
I'm seeing you after 20
So
years.
actually, Mona has worked with local populations of Arunachal, if I'm right.
Long time.
And she's worked on rhododendrons and so many other things.
You have to meet Abdi, and anyway, she'll tell you about it.
Yeah, she did.
Hi everyone. I'm a long-time friend of both Gitanjali and Monica. A product of Delhi University, Professor Babu's PhD student. And both of them continued in hardcore science. I moved on to something which we term as applied science, and I work with a lot of NGOs, not the ones who do a lot needed advocacy. We're not really an advocacy NGO, but we work on bridging the gap between hardcore science and field implementation, policy level gaps, which Gitanjali also mentioned. So presently I work with an organization called ICLEI, or International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives. Primarily we work on sustainable development issues with city governments, but biodiversity, as all of you understand, is not restricted with geographical boundaries, so the biodiversity unit works across rural urban areas as well. And I lead the biodiversity wing, work on a lot of biodiversity related issues and climate change issues. What brought me here was a Facebook post of Gitanjali where she showed her game. That's when I caught her, and then she said, no, you need to come along, and that's how I'm here. Happy to interact with you guys anytime.
Hope this has been useful for you also.
Yeah, this was really nice. This was really, really nice. I'm very happy that I came here.
Ojit is an insect biologist and he writes so much. He has an article almost every day in a vernacular language in Manipuri, you know. He writes in Manipuri and he publishes.
He's a photographer.
He's a science reporter guy also. I mean, he writes puzzles for Science Reporter. He's a science communicator from the core. So Ojit is from Ramjas College. He teaches zoology there. So this is the faculty, and we have students from botany mostly, life sciences, zoology, and from different colleges. Ramjas College is also represented. Thank you, Ojit, for bringing in your students, and I want to thank the teachers in absentia of sent students, especially
I
Renu
want to
ma'am.
say here, Monica, that mostly we end up giving one-sided monologues. And मैंने ये करा, मेरा ये research, मेरा ये slide, मेरा ये picture, and students listen very nicely like cows. But you guys have been so nice to ask us questions and keep us on our toes. कि ये बताओ, वो बताओ, bioterrorism. I love the fact that you have questions for us and probably more. This is wonderful. The interaction has been so enriching for us all. So I hope it has helped all of you.
So thank you so much. It was a pleasure to meet you all here. I'm so grateful. Without, we didn't offer any transport, nothing. And you still came. Thank you so much.